Hi folks, it's Andy and welcome to today's Kendo rant. Hope you're having a great day. Right, got loads to get through today. I'm going to quickly shoot through the questions and then I'm going to talk about what everyone's been asking me to talk about, which is my my impressions or my reactions to the men's team finals of the World Kendo Championships. So let's whiz through these questions first. All right. So it says, "Hi Andy, it's sort of a dumb question, but what are Hanshi and Kyoshi graduations? I don't get it." Okay, first off, it's not a dumb question. It's absolutely not a dumb question at all. It's, you know, you won't know that unless you ask. So thank you for asking it. Basically, as well as the Dan grades and the Q grades, you have a separate grading system in Kendo called Shogo. And there's 3 of them. The first one is Denshi, the next one is Kyoshi, and the next one is Hanshi. And you're able to take them after you get to a certain Dan grade. After you get to 6th Dan, you're able to take the Denshi. After you get the 7th Dan, you can take the Kyoshi. And after the 8th Dan, you can then be awarded the Hanshi. So for Denshi and Kyoshi, there's the... it's a kind of test, I think. It depends on the country and the sort of federation that you do it through. But I mean, it's usually like a written essay or something, and sometimes there's like a small kata test and a bit of a test. But it's not quite the same as a grading for your Dan grades. But for Hanshi, I believe you're actually nominated for it and then awarded it by the federation. Okay, so next one. I'm interested in learning more about creating an opportunity to attack from Tsubazeri. Did not know it was a hansoku to attempt a strike whilst withdrawing. Also, if it's taboo or even hansoku to basically push hard to basically have your opponent take a step back and then strike him off balance, how exactly is supposed to find an opportunity to strike? I can't think of another way. It's to be done from Tsubazeri. Okay, so I've done a full video about this. There's a video about Hikiwaza, so go and check that out, first of all. It's not hansoku to strike whilst withdrawing. That's only in high school tournaments in Japan. There's a rule that if they begin to withdraw, both start to withdraw, then they have to withdraw before they start again. If one tries to withdraw and this one does the Hikiwaza at that instant, or if it's again, the idea is that I'll talk about this more later because it's relevant to the World Championships, but still the idea is that it's not necessarily just because they're withdrawing. You're not really supposed to trick them into thinking you're going to withdraw and then do an attack. That's what it's against, but it's only at high school level. It doesn't apply to adult Kiai. And it's not a hansoku either to push hard, let them sort of go off balance so that you can make an attack. It's just if you do it aggressively, then yeah, it becomes hansoku because it's not really trying to make an opportunity. It just becomes you pushing the guy around. So you have to be a bit careful. But there's loads of things you can do other than push them to get an opportunity. Go and watch the video that I've done about Hikiwaza, and that'll give you an inkling. Okay, next one. Right, this one says, this is a bit of a long question. So this one's related to the World Championships as well. This is about the men's final though. This says men's individual final. As always, thank you for perspective answers. Please excuse my ignorance, but I'm interested in hearing your opinion on this. I agree that the final men's individual match was a great match because I talked about that in my last video basically. I've noticed that when they're in Ito Mai, I think you mean Isoku Ito no Mai, and about to strike, they seem to intensely tense up their arms. I'm sure it's a natural response to very fast meiji and adrenaline, of course, but as far as I've come to understand that its typical instruction around uchi is to relax and only apply power at the point of impact with arms extended. I understand Shiai situation can be an exception to regular, but it is, I can't read that word, didactic, is that a word? There you go, I'm no English major. But it seems much closer to Kenni, thus applicable. I know there aren't many hard and fast rules in any martial arts, and this may be one, but I'm interested in hearing your input on the instruction around strikes. I guess a simple question could be formed as, why do many senseis teach that we should be relaxed when these competitors seem so very tense? Is that even important, or am I assuming wrong? Again, I speak more from ignorance, so your input would greatly aid myself. Okay, so cool. Good question. I think they might look tense to you, but I think you'll find that the tension that they've got is not in the areas that you probably think. They don't have tension in their shoulders and arms. I can see that when I'm watching them, but that's probably because of experience. They have probably tension where they're gripping the shinai here, and there's certainly not in their shoulders, because they wouldn't be able to move that quick if they had tension in their arms. There's probably tension in their legs, and that's why it looks tense, because they've got such a good posture and their footwork's so sharp that they move sort of almost robotically, that in their sort of precision. But I'm pretty sure, mate, that they don't have a lot of tension going on in their arms and their hands and on the grip of the shinai, because if they did, they just would not be able to move or react that fast. Okay. Hi Andy, what do you think about wide stances so popular in high-level competitors? I mean, about the space between the legs when they're in kamae. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Okay, so generally, the wider stances, if somebody's using a wide stance all the time, then you probably find that they don't do so well in competition, because at the end of the day, the more you put your right foot out, doesn't actually get you any closer to the opponent. You can't jump any further just because you're putting your right foot forward. So if you've always got a long stance, generally your footwork sort of is wrong, and you aren't able to launch that quickly. What you do see though is that they start from a standard side stance, and then they apply semi with their feet. All right, so their feet come forward for kind of semi. And I've talked about this a bit in the Debanawaza video that I did about applying semi from your feet. And that's why it sort of lengthens that stance, lengthens it up. But if nothing happens, then the left leg generally comes up and they go back to being a normal size stance. So although it looks like they're in a wide stance a lot, it's more that they're actually applying pressure with the right foot by pushing it out forward. And then if something happens, they're already halfway there to actually leaping forward. Whereas they're not sort of in that sort of wide stance the whole time, generally, okay? Obviously, there's going to be exceptions, and there's going to be situations where it is like that. So it kind of, other than that, it's kind of a personal thing, depending on the actual people. But generally, they tend not to do so well with it. Hi Andy, sort of a long question about Kiai. Since I started Kendo 5 years ago, I've used a generally deep shout in practice in Shiai. However, over the past few months, I found that using a more shrieking Kiai tends to boost my energy levels and help me practice longer without feeling tired. The downside is that after practice, my throat feels slightly weird but doesn't hurt, and I'm always slightly worried that I might be damaging my throat. I still try to use my diaphragm as much as possible. But do you have any tips or thoughts of whether or not I can train my body to get used to this different Kiai? Very much appreciate your insight on the videos. Thank you. To be honest, I think basically you're supposed to do the shout from your sort of abdomen, like you say, you know what I mean? And of course that can, there's nothing about the pitch of it. And some people do have very sort of higher pitched screeching type Kiai, which I think is totally fine in general. I think probably it's just a case of practice, probably just because you haven't done it like that up to now. You'll probably get more used to it. But if it does start to hurt, then yeah, think about maybe considering doing it in a different way. But if it's not hurting, but just feels a little bit weird, I think you'll probably get used to it and it'll go away. Probably. So other than that, there's not a lot I can really say because I don't really know. I'm not experienced it like you are. Okay. Next one. Hi Andy, I was looking at this. This is from the early access group, by the way. If you're not in that group, get in the group. There's a link in the description. Hi Andy, I was wondering, looking at this match where one of the Kenshi is wearing full white Bogu. While not entirely unseen, it's certainly not a common sight, at least in major competitions. Personally, I think maintenance would be horrible since every hit will show up as a blue stain on the men, Kote, and probably the Tade too, eventually making the Bogu set look unkempt. What is your view on the white Bogu set as a whole, and why do they exist? Right, okay, so white Bogu sets generally exist mainly for girls and women. Men tend not to wear them so much. You get the odd eccentric guy that does. But generally, they tend to be reserved for women and girls. They do tend to stain a little bit more than other Bogu sets, but it's not like super like you know, really obvious. It's only the same as an indigo Bogu set or a blue Bogu set fading in colour. So that does sort of happen a bit, but it's not a massive thing. Why do they exist? I think they exist mainly just to look a little bit different. I'm sure there's some sort of reason there somewhere, but I've got a feeling that the actual original reason was more just because you know, somebody thought it was a kind of cool idea and then sort of brought it out. Especially as it's white and they often have a red door, so it's kind of reminiscent of the Japanese flag. And I've heard people say, oh, it's because it's for women and it's sort of to represent purity and stuff like that. But I've never really heard or seen any real hard evidence of that. I'm pretty sure somebody just came up with it because it kind of looks a bit different, a bit like having a different coloured door. So yeah, so that's that really. Next one, and then I'll get on to talking about the finals, because that's the... Okay, so I actually replied to this one on the thread itself. Again, this is in the early access group. But I'm going to cover it in this as well. It says, hi Andy, I'm a Q grade and I've recently fallen in love with Gyaku. I find the movement required easier to perform than standard do, and it's especially effective against other Kyusha. I have the first Q exam coming up in 1 month. Is it true that I should not try to perform Gyaku because it's considered a more advanced technique? Okay, so this one... yeah, I've written a comment, all right? You shouldn't attempt Gyaku because it's not. You shouldn't do it because it's an advanced technique. But you should really just, if it's first Q, you should just hit men, just attack men, because it's a lot like what I said in the comment. But they're not looking to see you. Whip out some sort of amazing difficult waza for a start. Don't forget, you're not trying to win, right? In your grading, in the match in your grading, you're not trying to win. You're not trying to score more points than the other person, all right? What you're trying to do is demonstrate that you have understanding and sort of a level of Kendo that's good enough to pass the grade. And you're not going to do that by whipping out Gyaku in a first Q exam. I'm not saying that they'll mark you down for doing it, but they certainly won't mark you up for it either. No, essentially, they don't care about seeing that. They want to know if you can hit men. They don't want to know if you can do Gyaku or not. So it's kind of, I just leave it to the side. If you find it really useful against other Q grades, that's great. Then go and take it to your Shiai, take it to your tournaments and do it there. But the grading's not the place for that one. I'm afraid, mate. You're better off just, like I say, just stick to your men cuts and show them that that's what you can do, because that's what they want to see, so that they can pass you. All right. So that'll do for questions for today. Let's get on to the main topic I want to talk about, which is this World Kendo Championships. So obviously I talked about the men's individual final in the last one, and I've also obviously watched the ladies individual final and the ladies teams final, and they were great matches as well. Some of the points that I've got to talk about on the men's team final kind of also spill over to the women's team final as well. But that being said, let's get straight into it. Okay, so it's Korea, South Korea, and Japan. Okay, and South Korea is the home nation this time because they're hosting the tournament, but they've never beaten the Japanese team. Okay, they've had many matches over the past history of the World Championships, and whenever they face each other, Japan always comes out on top. Now, that's just a bit of context. So this time, definitely go and watch the video if you haven't seen it already. There's loads of them on there. I have posted it actually on the KendoStar blog, so go and watch that. Here's the first thing, right? The first thing I'm definitely going to say is there's no way I'm going to be criticizing or dissing or critiquing even any of the decisions made by the referees in that match, because I don't think that it's my place to do so. I know a couple of the guys that were refereeing it actually, and I respect them very much. I certainly respect them enough not to criticise the decisions publicly, and I don't think I need to criticise them because they've been put in that position for a very good reason, and yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they're the refs and I'm not, so what they say goes, and that's how it is. All right, so you can like it, you can not like it, it doesn't really matter, because that's the fact, is what they say goes. That's their decision, so whatever decisions they made are valid, because that's the position that they've been put in, and that's the sort of power that they've been given. So criticising the refs is kind of a little bit nonsensical, and it happens a lot, especially when people want to criticise one particular side or the other. But I didn't see that much this time, having said that. But there might have been some things that the referees did or what have you, that even I personally maybe thought, maybe I don't think that's how I would have done it. But then how can I even say that, not being one of those guys, not being stood on the final of the World Kendo Championships, having to referee that, and not having the experience that those guys do. So I've got total respect for those guys, and I'm not about to start criticising any of the decisions that they made. So with that being said, I think there were some good points on both sides. Overall, I thought the Kiai was quite the whole match. I thought it was quite interesting. It was quite good to watch. There was some really good things about it, and there were some things that were not so good. The good things, yeah, like I say, both sides, the actual, I'd say overall, the ippon that were awarded were all really good. Overall, in general, obviously there's outliers, but that happens in any Kiai at any level. But yeah, I mean, in general, the points that were awarded were good, and there was some awesome fighting spirit on both sides. Now, the criticisms that I have seen that a lot is like, oh, both teams wanted to win too much. And that's something that's kind of, I don't get on board with that, right? So here we go. I'm going to get controversial myself now. I'm getting ready for the flame war that I'm going to start, like I did when I started talking about sword fighting. But right, as I said before on this channel a lot of times, right? I don't believe Kendo is about winning and losing, all right? Kendo overall is not about winning and losing. But as I've also said, winning and losing is a very important concept in Kendo. And the final of the World Kendo Championships is about winning and losing. It's very much about winning or losing. And you do everything you can to win, and you do everything you can not to lose. And I respect both of the players, both of the team's players, for participating and competing in the spirit of that, because that's how I believe it should be. Now, I have seen a lot of comments, and people have written a lot about excessive superserii, and they did so about the men's individual final as well. And my sort of answer to that is, frankly, yeah, I mean, that's exactly to be expected at this level of tournament, right? You've got especially in the finals, where you've got the two elite teams playing each other. It's not like they've got loads of different opportunities to go with. Once you get a point, you hold on to it. And as I said before, I'm not here to criticise the referees, say, well, they should have done this or that. That's up to them. And as a player, you deal with the situation that the sort of hand that you've been given. And if that's how the referees are managing the flow of the match, which it's their prerogative to do so, then you deal with that with how you see fit in order to achieve victory, because that's what you're there to do. You're not there to take unnecessary risks. And I heard people say, oh, well, it's boring. It's boring that they just hang in superserii or something like that. But yeah, maybe it's boring to watch, yeah. But those guys aren't there to entertain us. They're there to win the match for the sort of pride of their nation. And I can't knock them, and I've done it. I can't really criticise them, because I've been there, I've done it myself, where I've been a point up in a match, and I've just clung on to it for life or death. And I'd be happy to receive one hansoku for excessive superserii, if necessary. So that's how it goes. That's the name of the game in a way. It's tactical, if I'm honest with you. It's a kind of it's part of your tactics. It's part of your defense. And I also think, though, and I'll go into this more. I don't think that the Tsubazeriai was as excessive as it's being made out to be. It was excessive. There was a lot of Tsubazeriai, as there would be in this tournament like this. However, as I said, there's a reason for a lot of it, and one of it is to hold on to the points, but another part of it is because of how some of the players were actually engaging in Tsubazeriai or trying to use Tsubazeriai or incorrect Tsubazeriai to their advantage. Obviously, there was a lot of pushing. I'll come back to the Tsubazeriai thing in a minute, but obviously there was a lot of pushing and shoving, which again you always get. And it won't surprise me if we see some sort of ruling about not pushing above a certain height or something like that. Especially after, there's been a few injuries and stuff for people. There was nothing like that in this though. Yeah, there was a lot of pushing and shoving. And again, I think a lot of that stems from, some of the incorrect Tsubazeriai that was being sort of banded around. Essentially, okay. Frankly, both to some extent in the women's team final, but particularly in the men's team final, I thought one of the very disappointing things was to see the unwillingness to engage in correct Tsubazeriai displayed by the Korean team to be very disappointing indeed. They weren't really engaging in Tsubazeriai, and I know that looks like it kind of makes it look like Hansoku from one side, for the time wasting for the Japanese side. But the thing is that the Korean side just wasn't engaging in Tsubazeriai. Now, doing Tsubazeriai is not bad, and it's not Hansoku, it's not time wasting. But when one of you is trying to engage Tsubazeriai and the other is intentionally trying not to engage in Tsubazeriai, doing things like standing sideways and pushing their shoulder on you, withdrawing the Tsuba, consistently hooking the Shinai this way, then it's very difficult to kind of... It's difficult to judge that, and I kind of commend the referees in a lot of ways for dealing with that quite well, because I think they recognised that it wasn't just a case of one of the players trying to waste time, and rather it was a case of actually one of the other players was intentionally refusing to engage. So you can't really say, well, this guy, for example, and it did happen on both sides sometimes, but it was much more so on the side of the Koreans from my point of view. But where you have the Japanese player, you can't say that the Japanese player is not looking to make a strike when the other player is actively trying to avoid engaging Tsubazeriai. So yeah, I think that's a little bit of a point, and particularly in the Taisho-sen, okay, the last match, the Taisho match. Now, there's a lot of things that happen in that, but this again, the Tsubazeriai is really what kind of stood out to me, and that was I believe that it was a tactical decision by the Korean player to intentionally keep rushing into the Tsubazeriai distance and then hooking his Shinai around Ando's Shinai and then trying to back out very quickly, almost try to run backwards this way, forcing Ando to follow him, okay? It forces him to follow him. And that makes it look like you're trying to disengage from Tsubazeriai and he's trying to keep you there. But that's not really what's happening. It's actually a bit of a trick. He's running there intentionally in order to create that situation. But because he's hooked here, the minute that Ando tries to disengage, he's going to do that sort of forward men hit that he always does. And that most of the team were doing throughout the match. It's clearly a tactic that they've been, it seems to me anyway, it's clearly a tactic that they've been planning. So, and you can even see that the men strike that Ando lost to the Korean player was exactly that. The one time that he did let him disengage, he was struck on the men, exactly as the guy had been sort of planning. And he didn't even let him fully disengage, but he kind of let him go a little bit, especially as he was near the edge of the Shiaijo. But it was right then that he used it to his advantage. So where he was rushing in and then going backwards this way, this wasn't him trying to disengage. This was an aggressive action, a kind of part of tactics. You know, you can't do that. You can't. I mean, you can do that, but I mean, you can't rush in and then rush out, rush in, rush out, and refuse to engage in any sort of subsidiary, and then say that the other player is wasting time, which is really what I felt was happening for the most part. It was, you know, come in, hook, and as soon as they try to disengage, because it's very obvious as well. I can imagine from the point of view of the opponent, from the Japanese side, for example, from Ando-san's side, I can imagine that he's probably feeling, oh crikey, he's getting away. If I keep chasing him like this, I'm going to be awarded Hansoku. And that's something that I think, again, is an intentional tactic on the side of the Korean player. So again, I'm not surprised that he wasn't awarded Hansoku for the most part for that. I know he was awarded one later on, which I'm not sure if it was for that or not. I mean, that's up to them. But like I said, I don't blame him for the only option he had was to close down the distance. That's the only defense he had, because the guy was just trying to run away whilst hooking his shinai to create an opportunity. So yeah, I found it really disappointing that there was a lack of intention to engage in proper subsidiary. It would have been much nicer to see that from the Korean side. And of course, the sort of rolling around on the floor was pretty excessive as well. Stopping the match for every 5 minutes for this and that. It was, you know, I'm not saying that it was intentional, but it certainly looked it. I think most people would agree that that's what it looked like. And the bit where he just sort of fell over as well for no real reason seemed a bit odd. I mean, I'm sure he was very tired. I'm sure he probably had cramps or he was painful or stuff like that. But he wasn't the only guy that was in that situation. Everybody is in that, I think, at that stage of the day. So yeah, I mean, that was my sort of takeaway from that. I thought that was very I think it was a great shame that also sort of occurred, and I don't think it left a very nice impression of Korean Kendo because of that. And it's such a shame after that wonderful men's final where they had such that wonderful clean match, and for it to devolve into that in the final where I felt like, obviously the Japanese team weren't perfect. Yeah, they were playing for time. They were hanging around in subsidiary, but I just thought the sort of the tactics from the Korean side were just a little bit more egregious in my book. And then finally, the biggest thing though, I mean, overall the Shiai itself, yeah, they had good bits, had bad bits. Overall, it was quite enjoyable to watch. And as I said, the points that were scored were pretty spot on. But the one thing that really left a bad taste in my mouth, I'm sure it was everybody else, was the crowd doing the booing. And even people shouting. I mean, I think I even heard one guy shouting Hansoku like this. And again, it was in response to Ando just closing the distance when the guy was clearly hooking his shinai, looking for an attack. That's not Hansoku. But the guy was screaming Hansoku as if he's got some sort of authority to influence the referees. And then whenever a certain player, you know, whenever a strike wasn't awarded, or whatever, then you know, crowds were starting to boo or stuff like this, and there's just no place for that, you know. I mean, there's not a lot you can do about it, I think, but I mean, it's such a shame to see it, you know, and it really gives a bad impression of like not just Kendo in Korea, but the sort of Korean Kendo supporters. You know, it's like it's not gonna come off looking good. You know, it's a bad thing to do. It looks really childish, and it isn't what we're supposed to do. Cheering, all right. I know they don't like cheering and shouting, cheering and stuff like that. A lot of Shiai, but you know what? I don't mind that. I kind of forgive that. Happens a lot everywhere. You know, you're okay. You know, I don't mind when people are cheering on the success of people. What I don't like is when people are jeering the failure of others. And the other one that I have seen in Japan as well, which I thought was equally as reprehensible, is like in league matches where the result of a match determines another team in the same league's position or their result. So if this team loses, then the team that's not in, you know, that's already fought definitely goes through or whatever. cheering the defeat of a team. I think that's also equally as reprehensible, but you don't see it that much, but it happens. But yeah, I mean, I think that was a real shame to see people screaming and booing like that in that sort of negative way. I mean, that's really what it's not about. But yeah, finally going back to the comments about people making comments saying like, oh, they're just trying too hard to win. I mean, of course they're trying to win. It's the World Kendo Championships. That's what they're there for. That's the point. What's the point of having a championship if you're not trying to win? Kendo is not just about winning or losing, but the World Championships is. So it's not only about that, but the finals is. When you're in the finals, yeah, winning is the most important thing, 100%. And you do what you've got to do to do it. If they want to stop people hanging around in Super ZEI, of course, there's a few measures that can do that. The referees have the power to control that in the way that they see fit. Obviously, they did that this time, and the players played within those boundaries. They could have been stricter, they could have been less strict. That's up to them, and that's up to each individual shimpan. If you want to make it more objective, the other thing that they could do, like I say, just going back to that quickly, is the reason that another reason that I'm not here criticising the shimpan is because whether I agree with any decisions or disagree with them, I'd much rather have shimpan that make decisions that I disagree with than have any sort of computerized or electronic scoring or those sort of things. So you know, I'd rather have it as a human referee that makes decisions like that, even if that means sometimes I don't agree with those decisions. But the other thing they could do if they wanted to kind of discourage people hanging around in Super ZEI after they've got a point is do what they did in the All Japan Championships, which is extend the length of the match. So instead of a 5-minute match, they could be 10-minute matches. But then what you've got then is in a team match, especially in something like that, in a team match, that's going to be a really, really long match. But obviously, if you've got to hang around for 10 minutes instead of just the remaining, if you take a point 1 minute or 2 minutes in, and you've got to hang around for 8 minutes, it's a lot harder to do than hanging around for just 3 or 4. So that's one of the reasons that they put that in. And then yeah, finally, I'm sort of darting all over the place here because my mind's all over with it. There's a lot of things I think about it, but. I have talked as well in the past about the rules in Japan for high school shiai where they're not supposed to start to disengage and then hit or look like they're trying to disengage and hit. It's for reasons like I described about the Korean guy doing the hook and then sort of feigning the runaway so that he can make a strike. It's kind of deceiving not just the deceiving not just the opponent but actually trying to deceive the referees as well. It's partly to prevent stuff like that rules like that have come into place. And after watching that, it wouldn't be completely unexpected for them to start talking about introducing a similar policy at tournaments like the World Championships. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. So yeah, that's certainly food for thought. So right, I think that's about it. I think that's about as far as I'm going to go on it. I know I've probably said stuff that a lot of people are going to disagree with. That's totally fine. You're welcome to disagree with me. There's comments there to tell me how wrong I am. So use them. Like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Put a thumbs down if you hated it, whatever you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and shop at KendoStar because that's what keeps me going. Keeps me making these videos, and all the stuff's really, really good as well. We've got some awesome stuff going. I talked about the new Gaia Hakama, which is brilliant. I talked about that in the last video, and yeah, it's flying off the shelves, so get one while stocks last. Not that they're going to run out, we'll keep getting the stock in, but yeah, they're flying out fast, so get your hands on some if you want some. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video, and thank you very much for watching.